Okay, so today a little different Commodore. Today I have an Amiga 500 in front of me, and what I've been wanting to do, I have a few of these, but I like to keep everything stock. But I figured I would take one and kind of modify it. One thing that is a pain in the butt is putting floppies in and out to load programs. You know, the floppies on the right hand side here. I'm going to put a Gotek inside. So in order to do that, I'll leave these in the description. I've already 3D printed a bracket, and I am going to mount the LED display and the selecting knob on top here. So I 3D printed this. I'll leave the description in the link as well. The OLED display will go here. The encoder, the potentiometer will go here. So this will get mounted using these little tabs. They'll just slide right into the ribs there. And that's where this will go. Yeah, I know it's gray, but I just happen to have gray in my 3D printer at the time. I was printing some other things, so I'm just going to leave it. I could always paint it or just reprint it later. But for the sake of this video, I'm leaving it gray. I'm just waiting to see a comment or two as to why didn't you make it the same color as the case. So I don't have to mock up, chop up, whatever the case to fit plugs through. Okay, I'm going to use ribbon cable, and the ribbon cable will slide right in through here. I promise you it'll slide right in through there. You just got to kind of force it through. There you go. So this way I'm using the openings, the ventilation openings that are already there. You're not going to be able to put this through with plugs already in them. So I fortunately have the tools, the crimper, and the tools to make my own plugs. So I'm going to put the cable, the ribbon cable through, and then put the plugs on. And then on the other side, I'm going to put plugs so I can easily unplug the cables underneath to take off the cover. If you don't have a crimper, you don't have access to this kind of stuff, you know, you could buy ribbon cable, snip the ribbon cable, and then resolder the cable back together again. Okay, but I just wanted to show you, in all fairness, what I'm going to be doing here. Okay, so let's get down to it and show you what's up. Obviously, I've already taken the 6 screws that hold the case, you know, the top of the case on. So I'm going to take the case off, and that'll leave us exposed to the drive that's in there already. So first things first, for the ease of doing this, I'm going to take out the keyboard and just put it aside. Now, there are 4 screws that hold this drive in place. One is right here, okay, and the other 3 are on the bottom. So we're going to unscrew the 3 on the bottom. Which are right here. Slide your hand underneath to hold the drive from slipping right out. You could also undo those 3 screws from the bottom before you take the top case off. That way the drive will be ready to slide out as soon as you pop the case open. Probably easier to do it that way. So then the drive has 2 plugs. One is the power, which is here at the top. And one is the IDE cable. Well, I don't know if you want to call it IDE cable, but the ribbon cable here. Okay? So that is your drive. Okay. All right. Okay. So there's the Gotek mount. So then the Gotek then gets screwed into place. There's little tabs right here. Okay. So you can have an OLED display here as well as on the top. I'm going to go ahead and mount this one because I have extras. These are only like a couple of bucks in case I ever want to just display it here and not worry about this top piece. So that's what I'm going to do for now. And then basically, let me go ahead and get a couple of screws here and screw this Gotek board in place real quick. Okay, so now this this Gotek board has already been flashed with FlashFloppy. So I'll leave a link to a previous video that I've done on how to set up a Gotek device. So it's already been flashed with FlashFloppy. So you have to do that first, okay? Because it has to have the firmware on it for it to work properly. So once you do that, then you can mount it on here, or you can flash it after you put it on here, either way. But nonetheless, this has already been flashed. So I'm not going through those steps. I'll leave you a link on how that's done, but you need to do that in order for this to work. Okay, so I've done a couple of things here. Redid the encoder. So the encoder, all I did was I took out all the resistors and I flipped the pins here from the top to the bottom. So the encoder basically allows you, replaces kind of the two push buttons. This allows you to scroll through, you know, all of the, I guess, all the slots on the Gotek where you're going to be storing your programs. Okay. So the way that this is working right now with the way that I have it is this bottom pin here goes to the pins that would be shorted to the bottom one and the middle one here. That's the bottom pin. This next one is blank. It's not connected to anything. Again, we only need 4 pins, right? So it's not connected to anything. This next one here, the third one from the bottom, goes to the top. These 2 pins on the encoder, because there's 3 on one side, 2 on the other, it goes to the top pin here. These 2 pins, okay, right here, which is this bottom one and the one above hopping over, these 2 pins here go to JA on the Gotek, okay? And then you're left with the top 2 pins. The top 2 pins basically are the top and the bottom pins of the encoder here. These top 2 pins go to jumper JK on the Gotek board. Okay, so now we're going to crimp our connectors, you know. So as you can see, I routed, because that little box is going to be popped into the slots up here, I routed these from underneath. You can see the connectors that are going to be connecting to the connectors coming from the Gotek. I don't know if you can see that plainly, but anyways, again, obviously the connectors wouldn't have been able to fit through the slots. So you had to put the wires through the slots first, and then crimp the connectors on afterwards. So that's what I'm going to be doing here now. So Okay, so now we have our plugs for the top piece in place, and then you can trail these through underneath. Okay, just like so. All right, so that's how we do that. Okay, so let's go back and put everything together and keep our fingers crossed that it works. All right, stay tuned. Okay, so I think we're ready to wrap this up. I want to show you what I've done here. Here's the encoder, and you can see I kind of turned it up a little bit so the pins and the plugs are out of the way, so it can sit flush on the case. And you can see I put the OLED display in here. Now the OLED display, I use hot glue to keep it in place. And the reason I use hot glue a lot on this kind of stuff is because if I ever need to take this out, if you put just a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on the glue, it'll unstick it, and so it's easy to pop off. So if you ever have an issue with it, you can easily just take this out by ungluing the glue, so to speak. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Okay, so let's get the case here. Here's the top of the case. So I'm going to pull this out a little bit here. Okay. So when we had this tested earlier, we said the second one from the bottom wasn't used. I used a 5-pin connector, leaving the second one from the bottom open. So that's what we'll plug in here. Hope I didn't get this backwards, but we'll see. Get that in there. Okay, and then the top for the OLED is yellow. So we'll get this in here. Top's going to be yellow, so should have probably put the pin for the OLED in first. Anyways. Okay, so before we snap this in place here, let's make sure that this works. Okay. Okay, got the colors all lined up. Get a USB stick in here. All right. Okay, so I got this thing plugged in. Let's put some power to this and make sure that this works. All right, there we go. So make sure the encoder works. So that's working. So we're good to go. All right. So now it's a matter of just snapping this into place here where we're going to put it, which is about right there. Okay. And these wires, there's enough wire there. So we're ready to put this back together again. So make sure we hook the power up. Okay. The pins, I don't know if the camera can pick the pins up there, but you know, we already said that the encoder goes to the pins 1 below the top there, and then I'm skipping 2 jumpers, and then I'm putting a jumper on S0 here. So that's the pin setup. These pins here, again, you can go back in my description and look at how to set up a Gotek. That pin there is for programming it. So we've already programmed this. We put the FlashFloppy firmware on it. So we're good to go where this is concerned. So I also put the OLED here. If we ever want to take this off, we could just plug this into the OLED here. And you know, you have a working display on the side of the Amiga if you ever want to take this top mount off. Okay, so we're just going to put the keyboard back. Again, I'm not putting the shield back on, but if you did want to put the shield back on, again, you're going to have to extend the wires here for because the shield has a little lip on it, so you'll either have to bend that lip up or extend these wires for the power and for the data. Okay, so this plugs in here. Okay. Clear the buttons there. Okay, so let me get this screwed back together again, and we'll be right back to wrap this up. Yeah. Okay. Now we can put the case back on. Okay, much better fit. All right, so let me get this screwed back on, and then now we'll go and test it one last time. All right, stay tuned. Okay, so got the case back together. You can see how the Gotek lines up really nice, you know, along the where the floppy used to be. So we're going to basically go ahead and put a stick on it, and let's go ahead and turn it on. I'll show you the screen afterwards, but let's concentrate on this. So there we go. You can see the light. Disk 1, direct access, auto boot. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it on with auto boot, and let's see what the screen has to say. Okay, so I'm using the composite, so the image is not going to be too sharp, but you'll get the idea. So there we go. And it's booting just fine, just like it's supposed to. So here's where we make our selection of what we want to boot up. We're going to boot that guy up right there. Okay, so that's what's going to boot up. Oops. So that's on slot 1. So I put the encoder on slot 1, and that's what should be booting up right now. There we go. There you go, Amiga Workbench. So if you don't have your Workbench disk, you can put the Gotek in. You can go, the reason the battery backed up clock isn't found is because I unsoldered the battery from the expansion board that's in it because it was leaking. But anyways, so if you don't have Workbench, you can actually put a Gotek in, download the Workbench files, and put it on the USB stick, and you'll be all set to go. So there you go. And there you are. Okay, I didn't have a Workbench disk for this, so that's another reason why I wanted the Gotek is I had the files, so putting it on the memory stick and getting the Gotek running allowed me to boot up Workbench. So all right, so there you have it. I'll leave links in the description for all sorts of stuff, the STL files that I used here. I'll leave links to the AUTOBOOT, which allows you to put programs on the open slots. That way you can boot straight from those open slots. Once the program's in there, it makes life a lot easier. And more importantly, I'll leave a link to the video that I made on how to configure or how to push the firmware, FlashFloppy firmware, to the Gotek. You need to do that to set up the Gotek. So, all right, like I always say, you only live once, life is short. Enjoy the things that you enjoy doing. This is what I enjoy doing, is muddling through some of this stuff and hopefully helping others along the way. So have fun, live life to the fullest. Peace out. So before wrapping up this video, I wanted to make sure that I brought you up to date for a huge change that took place with these Gotek devices. In my video, you saw me hook up a Gotek device, but it was using an ST chipset. This is the CPU on these things. The new Goteks, so the ST chipset, those Goteks are no longer being made. So you might find one if you pick up an older version. I think they're better. They have more memory capacity for one. But in terms of cost savings, Gotek is now shooting out these new boards with this new chip, which starts with AT. So the bottom line is, now that these boards, the ST ones that you saw in my videos, are hard to find, and now that these new boards are in abundance, the wiring is a little bit different. For one, the encoder for the 3-pin side, where it's 2 wires skipping the middle one, is now connected to here, which I think this is, if I can read this correctly, J8. If I'm not mistaken. Anyways, it's the middle of these 3 pins. You have to solder these pins in. They don't come this way. So the wiring is a little bit different. So the clock goes here. So the other 2 wires stay in the same place to the back. And the OLED display is still in the same place, and it's still the same wiring as well. The only thing is you have to make sure that the version of FlashFloppy that you're flashing, putting onto the Gotek, is version 3.3 and above. I'm using 4.4a here, which is the latest version, and it works just fine. So, you know, if you go to the GitHub repository for FlashFloppy, and you go to the encoder section, you'll see the wiring scheme for it. But you can also take a quick picture of this, and that's how you wire it all up. Okay, so if you use version 3.0, let's say, of FlashFloppy, and that's what you push on here, your OLED display won't display anything. It'll be blank. So don't think your OLED display is bad if you flash the FlashFloppy firmware up here and you see that your display is blank. Just make sure you're on the latest version of FlashFloppy, because your OLED might be fine. Okay, so there you have it. That's the latest. Wanted to make sure I brought you up to date. Yeah. All right. Let's move forward.